For those who don't know, my name is Rob McGinnis, and I serve as PEC Senior Land Use Field Representative covering Albemarle, and I also cover Greene County, and I'll be talking a little bit about what's going on in Greene County in this presentation. And then you've already heard from my colleague, Faith Schweigert, who also contributed to this presentation. This presentation really represents PEC's ongoing work with data centers across Virginia, including all the energy infrastructure. So I'm not going to dive too deep into data centers and energy, the sort of energy infrastructure landscape for Virginia, but I'm just going to hit the high marks. I really want to auger in and really think about, or just talk about what's going on in Albemarle and the region. For those of you who don't know, PEC is 52 years old. We're a land conservation, land use, environmental advocacy organization hovering around 50 individuals. We cover, as you can see in that map, you can see Charlottesville, so it's 9 localities. 8 of them are actually in the Piedmont. 4 Clark County is actually in the valley. I don't know how that came about all those years ago. Our headquarters is actually in Warrenton, and then we have about 7 people that work out of the Charlottesville office. And to the left is our mission. This is not real recent, but PEC just went through a strategic planning process, and so I'm not going to read that, but you can see it there, what we're involved in. Many of you already know what our mission is. So I want to talk a little bit about regional transmission and data center, and provide a little bit of context, and then move on to what's going on in Albemarle, Charlottesville, actually, and the surrounding counties to some degree. And then I'm going to talk about data centers in Albemarle. This is a great image. You can't see I think there were labels on this, but what you're looking at is on the top of the roof of that data center is all the equipment for cooling a data center, which requires a tremendous amount of energy. And on the right, those boxcar size boxes are diesel generators. As you can imagine, it's not a good idea to have a data center go silent. And so they have to have a power generating capability so that they never lose power. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Faith. Diesel generators, cooling. Also, fuel storage. You've got to have a source of diesel fuel to fuel these. There are generators that could be gas generators. So data centers, they're getting bigger and bigger. Prior to 2018, data centers used about 10 to 15 megawatts per building. And now it is actually increasing substantially. If anybody followed the Woodridge Solar Project in the county, that was 138 megawatts. It was characterized as powering about 25 to 30,000 homes. The way PEC looked at it, because it likely the power will be purchased by somebody like Amazon or some other data center, it actually powers about 1 to 2 data centers. And these data centers are actually going to be requiring more and more megawatts. Here's a sort of overview of where we're seeing data centers. And then if you just look at Loudoun County alone, which is a data center capital of Virginia, which is a data center capital of the world, and I'm not making that up, there's, I believe, 180 data centers in Loudoun County alone. And so this is just to remind everybody, you get power transmission, goes from whatever the source of power generation is, whether it's solar or coal or gas or wind, and it goes through transmission lines to a substation, and then it goes out into the main leader lines and off into the users. And just so you know, basically the way data centers work are they need to have a minimum of a 230 kilovolt transmission line supplying energy into an area where data centers need to link up, and usually there's a substation involved as well. This is a map of the PJM interconnection, which is the grid manager for most of Virginia and all these other states, and they're the sort of industry manager of how after power is generated and it goes into the grid system. And you can imagine that all these systems are interconnected, and this will make sense in a minute. But you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but if you look on the lower right, the sort of mauve or pink color is Dominion, and then the purple is APCO, Appalachian Power. So Virginia isn't all Dominion Energy. So here's that's a natural gas peaker plants to the left. Then it goes into transmission, and then it gets to these sites. So we're talking a huge amount of energy needs to be generated and continue to be generated and increased, and the grid needs to be strengthened to handle this incredible growing demand. So the current load from data centers in Virginia right now, 3,200 megawatts. And what we're looking at going into the future is 54,000 megawatts or 13.5 million homes. And we're talking about Virginia alone. So what are the land use impacts that you deal with? So obviously there's going to be land use associated with transmission lines, whether they're new ones or existing transmission lines that are upgraded, and existing or new substations. But in addition, you have water usage. And so the cooling of these data centers in many cases uses potable water. Sometimes it's wastewater. PEC has been advocating for the use of wastewater, gray water, and closed systems instead of using potable water and that moving into basically back into water treatment plants eventually. Air quality issues. So when those generators are being tested, or if there's a power outage, you can imagine if there's a power outage in eastern Loudoun County with all those data centers and their diesel generators running at the same time, you get air quality issues with all that diesel, noise issues with the diesel generators or just the cooling units. Fire protection and fuel storage are major issues. And what we're seeing in Loudoun County in particular, but also in Culpeper and other locations, are the compatibility or incompatibility with adjacent uses, in particular residential. Lighting, there's all these security systems. These are highly secure facilities. And so you get issues with lighting in terms of light pollution and having to have better design standards. Just the building design alone and the energy efficiency of actually how those buildings operate is a major issue. They're just big boxes. They don't need any windows. So there's other kinds of building design issues. And then there could be impacts to parks, other environmentally sensitive areas like wildlife habitat. So here's over 4,000 diesel generators approved as backup in Loudoun. I'm talking about Loudoun because we really don't have this situation where we are now, but this is growing. This is a growing issue across Virginia. So you're looking at a huge amount of power, to the point where there's actually proposals have been put on the table to utilize those generators to supply electrical power into the grid in high demand periods, which is insane. So here's the issue of proximity. This is in Loudoun. There's a data center complex. It's not very far from residential park, the Washington Old Dominion Trail. All really important issues, and also there's the sort of equity issue of these facilities being sited near communities that really don't have the ability to help steer better projects, better locations, low income, elderly, also near schools and hospitals. There is actually a proposal right now that's being put forward for a data center developer to front it on the public street in front of those data centers, 100% low income housing. So there they are dangling 100% low income housing with many units, and then say, well, why would those people want to be near a project like that? It's just insane. So here's a trail system, and look at the infrastructure that has to be built to support those data centers and behind. So basically what we're looking at is explosive growth rates of data centers requires massive amounts of energy and infrastructure. A big one for you all, threatening and others, it's threatening Virginia's Clean Economy Act, that our clean energy future. There's no way we're going to meet any of the goals in the VECA if we keep seeing this massive explosion of data centers and the need to delay the decommissioning of fossil fuel power plants, and I'll be getting into that in more detail. And then the ratepayers are who are paying for this. So clearly, right now, that's the way it works. All of the new power generation, all the new and renovated transmission lines, we're all paying for it. And many communities aren't getting any of the tax benefit. 25% of Loudoun County's budget is from the taxes collected on data centers. So what's going on, and I'm showing you this because this definitely will impact what goes on in Central Virginia. The National Interest Electric Transmission Corridor is the federal government's plan to basically streamlining the approval of these transmission lines, whether they're wreck and rebuild or new lines. And they're directly coming from coal plants to move electrical energy into the areas where the demand is skyrocketing. This is not a good situation. In Virginia, a number of projects that are proposed by developers, energy transmission developers, are proposed and put forward to the PJM interconnection. These were last year's proposals. Many of these have been approved, and you can see Albemarle is right there with a project, which I'll get into more detail. The two circles are, incidentally, the more southern circle is where Ravenna Station and Ravenna Futures is located. And the one that's in Greene County, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is where Greene has located their new Tech Flex R&D land use districts. There are two of them, 500 acres, and that's where they've identified data centers to go into. I will tell you that Madison County has done their own investigation into the feasibility of data centers. What's affecting the feasibility of these rural counties, particularly Madison and Greene, is a lack of 230 kilovolt transmission lines. But that's not going to stop them. If you go over and you look at Orange on the very east side where Wilderness is, you can see there's a line that goes through southern Albemarle. That huge line is basically going through Louisa and their future data center campuses, and also going right to Wilderness Battlefield, where PEC discovered through a lawsuit and FOIA that Orange County supervisors, the county government, was in discussions with data center developers. So now we're kind of looking at projects that are starting to move forward. I will tell you that the project that's purple line, that's a wreck and rebuild, which is basically within the existing alignment of existing transmission lines that exist today, is not going to go away, but it's not an active project right now. We monitor for this all the time, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So here's what's going on in Prince William Gateway. Those are all data center buildings. It's a massive project that was very political, and it was divisive politically and with people who live there. 37 buildings, 15 substations. Culpeper has multiple projects. Some are built already. They're getting to build more, and many of the new ones are right next to downtown Culpeper and the Veterans Administration National Cemetery, which is just almost a crime. And then this is Louisa, $11 billion investment by Amazon Web Services into 2 data center campuses, up to 20 to 25. And basically, Louisa County has a technology overlay district. They open the door wide open to what's happening in Louisa. And basically, they recently have shut the door to and will reduce the total acreage after Amazon made this commitment. So they're satisfied that they're going to get their tax revenue. They also have they're now going to limit the number of solar projects from 3% of the county's area down to 2%. They basically said, we're getting everything we need, we can shut the door now. So in Albemarle and Charlottesville, this wreck and rebuild line goes from Gordonsville, and actually it really goes from the west. It's really, think of it from Dooms on the other side of the mountain in Augusta County, all the way through Albemarle County, through the city of Charlottesville, and going along the southwest mountains to Gordonsville. And the reason is that they're trying to bring energy from the west where the coal power plants are, and they're wrecking and rebuilding lines already. In fact, this whole line that goes through Albemarle County has already been going through a wreck and rebuild already. The last phase of it that's going over the mountain is going through the wreck and rebuild now. And down in Scottsville here, you can see this line, and there's some of it's going to be new. All that's going all the way up into Louisa to feed the data centers in Louisa and go all the way up to the nuclear power plants at Lake Anna. This is interesting. This is a line that goes from the Southwest Mountains across Stony Point over to Hollymead. All the little kind of yellowish dots are all substations that also have to be expanded to accommodate all this growth. And you can see this tiny little line right here. That was in this project. It's not in there now, but I'm going to show you where Ravenna Station is and Ravenna Station Future. So if you're following this, the county created an LLC, bought 426 acres from Wendell Wood, Hunter Wood, and the whole, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I'm happy to answer, but essentially the whole point was to expand the ability for the federal government to expand their federal facilities, and then to be able to attract as many government contractors and universities as possible that would be leveraging the intellectual property from the universities and also feeding back into the contracts that these private companies would get from working with the federal government. So what we need to think about is why is this line being wrecked and rebuilt all the way up to Hollymead? Well, this is where Ravenna Station Futures is. And incidentally, they just rezoned it, and it's all rezoned light industrial. And this will make sense. Why would they do that? Why isn't it just office or office park or some other kind of? And so here's the Greene County line, which kind of moved a little bit. They wouldn't be happy about that. That should be down here. But also what the county didn't talk about when they talked about Ravenna Station and Ravenna Futures, I had to learn about it in part from Greene County, and Greene County's Economic Development Authority characterized it as a defense intelligence innovation corridor that's running from Greene County for 8 miles. The way it was characterized by Albemarle County was Silicon Valley at its onset. What does that mean? And what does that mean to the comprehensive planning work, land development? There's no detail. There's no they're not addressing any kind of land use, environmental, climate action impacts, anything, transportation. So I did some more digging, and a recent Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission report came out on economic development that covered its service area. And in the appendix is components of Go Virginia, which is Virginia's statewide economic development initiative. And in the Region 9, where this is, it also goes all at the Fauquier, they describe a DoD Intelligence Innovation Corridor extending from Fauquier County all the way into Albemarle along 29, as well as another one that would be on 15 and going into Orange. We don't know what that means. But when you start to connect the dots and you see Madison County, Orange, all these counties are looking at the feasibility of trying to get data centers in their counties. So I'm not going to read this, but the level of potential similar to Silicon Valley at its onset, what they see Ravenna Station Futures or Ravenna Futures as is a catalyst for all this other development that would occur in the county along the 29 corridor. So, we've been asking questions. I'll get into that in a minute, but there's no coordination at all between this initiative and what's going on in AC 44. There's scant information that was previously proposed in the comp plan goals and objectives under economic development with Ravenna Station. And I will tell you, every planning commissioner and every supervisor supports all of this, all the Ravenna Station work. So I contacted the county planners a year ago and asked them what would happen if a proposed data center project would be, if it showed up, how would the county handle it? And the answer I got from the two county planners, the acting director of planning and a senior planner, was, great question. We don't know the answer. We need to go to the zoning administrator and we need to go to the county attorney. And I said, great. I look forward to hearing back from you. I waited a month, no contact. I reached out to them again, crickets, no response ever. So how is this really relevant? And what's happened is data centers in the last Board of Supervisors AC 44 comp plan work session under community facilities, which did address solar energy generation, like large, projects with lots of arrays. One of the supervisors asked the question, what about data centers? Now, PEC's been feeding the supervisors, planning commissioners, and staff information about data centers for for months off and on. This is what they're about. These are the impacts. You need to understand best practices. And so during that work session, it was brought up and they went through their order. So every supervisor had their say about their concerns about data centers, and Jim Andrews, the chair, turned to the planning director and Jeff Richardson, the county executive, and said, can you address this? And they said, we'll come back to you with a presentation on data centers, and that's it. And we never heard anything. During that discussion, one of the planners basically nonchalantly said, oh, well, data centers, we've kind of determined that we understand that they would be by right in any industrial district. That was the first anybody had heard that. So I'm not going to read these, but data center is defined in the code of the county code. It is the only place you will find any reference to data center at all. It's not in any zoning category. It's not defined as a land use, not at all. And we just heard all about data centers, so I won't address that definition. But it's important to understand data processing facility. That's also defined, and it is addressed in the county code as a land use for certain kinds of land use districts. Means the facilities where electronic data is processed by people. So just keep that in mind. So I just went through this. What that planner, so the Southern Environmental Law Center, PEC, there's other NGOs perhaps that have been reaching out, trying to get some clarification on what the heck is going on here and what does this mean. So remember, if they think it's by right, it's their interpretation that's by right in industrial districts, and the county just rezoned, a couple hundred acres into light industrial at Ravenna Station Futures. Today, they could apparently a data center project could be proposed with no legislative process, no special use permit, no conditions, nothing. They could just go build it with no ordinance and no performance criteria at all. So we're working. Our position is that they should not be by right in any district at all, and that they should be only by special use permit in industrial districts and maybe in Tech Flex R&D. Greene County is miles ahead of Albemarle. Greene County has already taken on the issue of data centers and said that they will be considered by special use permit only, and only go in their Tech Flex and R&D districts, and they would be required performance criteria to be met by the applicant for the project, and they would become conditions under their special use permit. We don't even have that in this county. And so the county code, we're arguing, needs to be amended to address data centers properly. So I hope I didn't go on too long. And I'm gonna, would you want this presentation made available to your members? I guess it's recorded, so you really don't need to do that. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, the plan, Rob, would be for us to, convert it into a video that we could put up on YouTube within the next week, basically.
Okay, sure.
And send you to a link, and then you all could link to it if you felt like it.
Yeah, please do that.
I think you all linked to your last presentation here.
Rob, can I ask you a question? Do you know if the university has been involved in any of this? I mean, we're not too far. You're not too far from that research center that's up by just beyond the airport.
Yeah. So I will tell you that Greene County's economic development director wrote a briefing document for their let me just get rid of this thing. For their board of supervisors, and in it, Alan Yost, in a very short statement, basically said that Greene County has been working with Albemarle County, the Chamber of Commerce in Charlottesville, Albemarle Chamber of Commerce, the University of Virginia, the University of Virginia Foundation, the Department of Defense, and the Commonwealth of Virginia's Veterans and Military Affairs Office, all working together to understand what the possibilities are for that innovation corridor. I don't know if anybody is directly involved other than Albemarle County in the data center. I'll say the data center matters or issues, but they're related. And so here's another way to connect the dots. So if you monitor economic development like I do, the chamber says, hey, we're really excited that company A from Silicon Valley is moving to Charlottesville, to Albemarle County, to UVA's Foundation's research park at the airport. What does that company do? Well, they are experts in utilizing AI, and they model battlefield. Like for planning how the military would conduct, operations, and they use AI to do that. There's a relationship between AI, which is different than you and I just, storing our photographs. You need to have, I won't even get into it technically, but you need to have the AI facility as close as possible, meaning the data center needs to be as close as possible to the users of AI. So there's a degrading, the longer distance through the infrastructure that's out there that they're using to connect to the data centers, the less attractive it is. So that might suggest there could be a data center. I've been asked, could there be a data center at Fontaine Research Park? The answer is yes, because there's a substation and there's transmission line that runs right there. So that could be a purpose-built single user data center that would just support the work of whatever research is being done for the biotechnology sector at UVA. So we just don't know. And we probably will never know until somebody decides to propose it, because UVA is not going to share that information.
Yeah.
Neither will the foundation.
So, any other questions for Rob? Bob?
I have two thoughts. One, it seems that the data processing equipment is really inefficient in terms of its output of heat and its use of energy. And there should be pressure put on that technology to improve its efficiency so that it doesn't create such a burden elsewhere. Number two, this all looks like vast amounts of money being invested. And the investment there is not being done for charity. It's being done to get a return on an investment.
Yep.
Where is the return on the investment? And if that return on the investment doesn't come to pass, what happens then?
Well, I can address the first observation, which is there is global efforts on pressuring this industry to be more energy efficient and to ironically even use AI to design better systems. And there's no reason to believe that may not be that is not occurring. So I work I'm on the ground here, and then Julie Bolthouse, who's our director of land use, is working at the state level. We've brought in experts from Europe, looking at all these best practices, and it includes pressuring these industries to improve their technology, to reduce all the way to the point where a Loudoun County supervisor had this white paper saying they should generate their own energy on site. Well, you can't build enough clean, renewable energy to do that unless it's a small modular nuclear reactor. And I just don't know if that's a non-starter. So there's really, it's just a problem. I mean, even the cooling technologies are increasingly improving to reduce water requirements. There's technologies that are available out there now, and there are new ones coming online. How that affects projects that are built and you get these new technologies is another matter as well. In terms of I mean, many of these data centers are, they're the largest, richest companies in the world that own them. That just says it right there. And then not only that, but because they need to keep building more of these, you're seeing localities almost begging for these projects to show up to help solve their financial problems. So, for example, Louisa County is one of the fastest growing counties in Virginia. And so they're going to have to build schools, and they don't want to increase taxes politically. They don't want to increase taxes. So they go capture. This has played out similarly, but with a lot of different factors with large scale utility solar. You get a windfall of money. I would say that the data centers are much more, they yield much more in terms of tax revenue. And that's attractive to these communities. I do not know, because nobody on the planning commission or the supervisors has addressed any of this on where they are in terms of, hey, we can have a couple that might be fun. We'll solve some budget problems. We've got to build 2 schools. We have to pay for those. How do 2 elementary schools? So I just don't know. There's just been no discussion at all.
Other questions for Rob or Annette? Go ahead, Annette.
So that kind of answers my question on, are they paying any attention to the impact of climate, of new development of whatever kind, this being massive data centers, on climate impact and carbon emissions and all that stuff. So does the county have anything to say at all about that?
No, not
Rob?
right now. No, my camera's going wonky. I'm gonna turn it off.
Yeah, let me just say, there's a thunderstorm right around here.
Yeah,
If you all don't mind, I'd like to give Mary
Yeah.
Rickham and Mary Elster a chance to just talk and then come back to broader discussion of both presentations. But the storm could knock us out any time here. And
yeah, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me individually at any time. I'm happy to talk
Yeah.
about what we're doing.
This has been really, really interesting, Rob. Thank you.
Yep.